Subject of fifth video, the God particle. Hello again world and God's people. If this is your first visit, welcome. However, I recommend that you view the last 4 videos as they set the groundwork for the follow-up ones. But if you watched the videos already and this is your follow-up, then let's get to it, as you are most likely a seeker. We are going back to the evidence related to the atom's presence in biblical parables. The biblical stories involved in this video are pieces of biblical evidence laid out in parables that support my claim that God was fully aware of the atom. These 3 examples directly depicted the structure of the atom as they evolve around the magnificence of the 3, the number of different particles that make up the atom, that of the neutron, the proton and the electron. We begin by reviewing the structural design of the atom and its particles. If you look at the atom's image in video here, the negative electron is the one running around in circle. Underneath it and in the center of the atom is the positive proton and neutral neutron holding on to each other. Because the negative and positive particles are opposite of each other, they are therefore attracted to one another. This is where the neutron, which has no charge, comes in to play its role of keeping these 2 forces apart. In doing so, the atom is stabilized and, as I claim, makes the life of the atom as immortal in equivalent to God. The neutron, as I claim in book, was presented biblically as God's particle. I begin laying out the evidence here. It is only by the grace of the neutron that the universe and life on Earth became possible. Keeping the opposite attract forces apart is the root of the survival of the atom and, as I claim, the fundamental design of heaven and earth. That is my amateurism view, but based on the atom's facial design. The design of the atom and its particles, as I claim, was imitated and transferred to design Adam with. In previous video, I explained how God redesigned the atom's opposite attract particles and used it in designing Adam. God first classified the redesign as male and female in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. The male and female were labels given to the redesign of the negative and positive particles of the atom. The male and female were turned into positive and negative emotions later. Emotions, as we know today, are also grouped into positive and negative emotions. So this was the first incident that I provide as evidence of God's awareness of the atom's design. From this point forward were stories that involved the opposite attract design of the atom, such as the creation of man and his opposite of woman. The first appearance of good and evil, the trees of life and its opposite of tree of knowledge, which was the tree of death, and many others outlined in book. Ever heard of the question as to why God of the Old Testament was different from the Son of the New Testament? The opposite attract design of heaven and earth is the why. God had to depict himself as evidence for us to discover, and associate him to the fundamental design of heaven and earth. God could not escape the design, as I claim, especially if the atom and man were created from his image and likeness. But the following 2 events discussed below were not only monumental biblically, but they were direct, and they laid out the foundation of supporting evidence that depicted the neutron as God's particle, as I claim. This first one involved Noah and his sons in Genesis chapter 9, verses 18 to 27. Noah and his family were the sole survivors of the flood. He only had 3 sons, and all of mankind according to God came through these 3. I refer to Noah as the fittest to survive of mankind, as God recorded his survival traits as being just, perfect, righteous as he walked with God. One of the clues of his fitness was that he also had 3 sons. He could have 4, 5, or 10 sons, but Noah had only 3. This was the first clue that God used to confirm the preservation and passing of the magnificence of the 3 design from the pre-flood generations to the future. The 3 sons became a piece of evidence to add to and affirm that Noah was the fittest to survive. The atom was with Noah. God then confirmed the presence of the atom further and its transfer to future generations. It was done with a parabolic story with meaning that is still left unresolved today, for me at least. It had been one of my unresolved questions, and I am happy to report that I think we got it now. Once I found the involvement of the atom in biblical record, then the parable revealed itself. According to story, one day after the flood, Noah got drunk and passed out naked. His youngest son Ham saw him naked, and based on story, he should not have done that. He told his brothers Shem and Japheth about it. So they walked backwards with a piece of garment and covered him. When Noah found out, he issued their assignments in life in poetry form in Genesis chapter 9, verses 24 to 28. Noah said the following: "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brothers." Canaan turned out to be descendants of Ham, the youngest son who saw Noah naked. Then he said this about Shem: "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." Then Noah said this about Japheth: "May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem. And may Canaan be his servant." So the parable was set out this way. Out of the 3 sons, Ham was the youngest, and since his father cursed him, he therefore represented the negative electron in this parable. He is the blue ball running around in circles. In this image, Shem is the orange particle, and as the blessing tied him to God, he is therefore the representative of the neutron of the atom. Japheth then is the yellow particle and therefore the representative of the positive proton. Each of the sons represented a particle. The negative electron runs around in circles above the center or nucleus of the atom. It is always working in a way as it is constantly running around in circles. According to God here, the negative electron is the servant of the atom. As Ham was cursed with assignment as the servant to his brothers, this meant that God tied Ham to the negative electron of the atom. In verse 27, a tent is mentioned and it belongs to Shem. I am claiming that the tent God referred to here was the nucleus of the atom where the proton and neutron live. The nucleus of the atom was represented by the tent. In book, I claim that the neutral neutron of the atom is God's particle. Noah first made this link in this story by tying God and Shem. In that case, Shem represented the neutral neutron. Japheth was assigned to dwell in Shem's tents. In that case, since Shem is the neutron and his tent is the nucleus or center of the atom, then Japheth represented the positive proton particle. Noah then said something with monumental spiritual meaning, that also provided additional evidence that Japheth was assigned as the positive proton. I did not cite this in book, however, as I did not see its meaning until after the final edit. Noah said, "May God enlarge Japheth." As Japheth represented the positive proton or positive emotions, Noah was praying for God to enlarge positive or good emotions. It is the only meaning that fits with the design of the atom's particles. Noah could neither pray to enlarge Ham if he represented the negative electron, nor Shem if he was the representative of the God particle, but Japheth if good was what God wanted man to develop and strengthen. This was hidden in the message, but consistent with how the brain was designed to be developed, however, with the use of positive emotions. But a convenient coincidence is provided by science that strengthens this claim. They have measured the sizes of the particles, and some have calculated the size of the positive proton to be 1836.15 times bigger than the negative electron. What one can reasonably claim here is that by enlarging Japheth the proton, God provided the evidence to prove his full awareness of the atom. God enlarged the positive proton, and science came to reveal the meaning of the parable with its size. The tent provided the final clue, as with it, Shem and Japheth were separated from Ham, who was assigned as their servant. And as generally understood today, the electron does not rest but runs in circles. God defined Ham's task as a servant in parallel to the neutron's constant motion and movement in the atom, and in process, preserved the evidence of the transfer of the magnificence of the 3 from Adam to the descendants of the new world. So each of the 3 sons represented a particle of the atom. Ham was the negative electron, Japheth the positive proton, whereas Shem was the neutral neutron. The second event is also one for the ages, and it is often used by atheists and typical fools to make fun of biblical record and our God with. This was recorded in Genesis chapter 15. This event was presented as the signing of the contract between God and Abraham. Instead of using pens, God not only chose to reveal to Abraham the material he used to design heaven and earth with, but of his presence in the atom. The contract was about the land that God promised to give to Abraham. When Abraham challenged God as to how he would know for sure that he would inherit the land, God then told him this: "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove and a young pigeon." After Abraham brought them, God told him to cut these 3-year-old animals in halves, and place them opposite one another, but not to cut the birds. When the sun was about to set, Abraham fell asleep, and a great darkness fell upon him. It was then that God first told Abraham about his plan to send his descendants to slavery. As the night got darker, God then directly identified his representative particle in the atom for the first time. A clue was presented with Noah, but this time, God made it known directly. According to record, Abraham saw a smoking oven and a burning torch passing in between the halved animals. God then confirmed the promise about the land that he allotted already to Abraham. The scene was depicted parabolically this way. God wanted 3-year-old animals. He did not want 4, 5, 6 or 20, but just 3 animals and all 3 years old. They were cut in halves and were then laid out opposite each other. Then a smoking oven with a burning torch walked in the middle of the halved animals. God laid out the structure of the atom here. The 3 particles were there, and when the halves were laid out opposite each other, thereby depicting the nature of the opposite attract structure of the atom's particles. To confirm that this was the depiction of the atom, God walked in the middle with fire. Fire became the symbol that accompanied God from this point forward in the Torah. And it was here that God first identified himself as the neutron of the atom. For example, he was the fire that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. God was the burning bush when Moses met him. The mountain was on fire when he met Moses and the elders, and God was the fire at night when he walked with Israel in the desert with the Ark of the Testimony. The whole scene that Abraham was witnessing in what appeared to have been during the state of dreaming, was a depiction of the structure of the atom. There were 3 animals which depicted the 3 particles of the atom. They were all 3 years old. The animals were cut in half and laid opposite each other, which directly depicted the opposite attract structure of the positive and negative particles. And to confirm that the scene was about the atom, God, who became fire in later stories, walked through the middle of the halved animals. In doing so, God revealed his place in the atom structure as the neutron. God's place is in between the negative and positive particles of the atom, just as he sits between good and evil. He depicted this by walking through the halved animals as fire. On these 2 parabolic stories alone, God confirmed the passing of the magnificence of the 3 to future generations with Noah and his 3 sons. Then directly depicted himself as the neutral neutron with Abraham. In doing so, God revealed and answered a question of mine and most likely one of yours as well. The question is, how could God be everywhere in the universe at the same time? The answer is simple. Because according to science, all ordinary matters in the universe, including our brains and hearts, are all made of atoms. And in these atoms is God's particle, the neutron. This is the scientific tool that makes God's omnipresence possible and a fact. Wherever the atom is, so is God, as all matters in the universe are made from the atom. Our experts are still tearing heaven and earth apart in search of God's particle, but it had been identified and recorded in biblical record for thousands of years already. The neutron is that particle, and our experts coincidentally already proved that. This is coming up on next video. There is a much more extensive discussion in book about this subject. But in upcoming video, I will point out 2 more pieces of biblical evidence that definitively proves claim that the neutron is God's particle. These 2 parabolic stories about Noah's 3 boys and their blessing, as well as the signing of the covenant between Abraham and God, are my pieces of circumstantial evidence that paved the way to the final piece of evidence that's coming up on next video. But this is all for now. If you find value in video, Be a priest for the community by liking it and sharing it on social media so others can have access to information to either discover God for the first time, or strengthen ongoing relationships with Him. Subscribe as well to my TM3 Club YouTube channel so you can be notified when follow-up videos become available. Thank you for stopping by. The Magnificence of the Three is scheduled to be released on April 15th. Pre-order yourself a copy on Amazon, iTunes or Barnes & Noble's outlets. If these video summaries indicate book as a worthy survival tool for yourself and future generations of family. Till next time, take care of yourself and may you find peace in your daily struggles with God in your life. Thank you once again and stay blessed.